What if the private notebooks of a scientist were still too dangerous to touch, even more than 100 years after she died? In a quiet library in Paris, the notebooks of Marie Curie are not kept like ordinary papers. Anyone who wants to see them must first sign a safety document. The pages are stored inside lead-lined boxes because they are still radioactive today. The handwriting is old. The paper is fragile. But the energy inside those pages has not disappeared. That single image opens a strange question. What kind of life leaves behind notebooks that still carry invisible power? Hello, my friend. Welcome back to English Mindwave. Before the world called her Marie Curie, before her name entered science books, before she became the first woman to win a Nobel Prize, she was Maria Skłodowska, a girl born in Warsaw in 1867. At that time, Poland was not a free country. And so in Maria's part of Poland, Russian imperial rule controlled schools, language, and memory. Polish history could not be taught openly. The Polish language was pushed out of classrooms. Lessons had to be taught in Russian. For Maria, school was not only a place of education. It was also a place where power tried to control what young minds were allowed to remember. Her father was a teacher of mathematics and physics. He believed deeply in education. But the authorities did not trust him, so he lost his good position. The family became poor. Still, inside their home, scientific instruments remained. Glass tubes, measuring tools, small pieces of equipment that seemed ordinary to some people, but to Maria, they were windows into a hidden universe. She wanted to understand how things worked. Even as a child, Maria had a remarkable memory. She could read by the age of 4, and at school, she answered questions with unusual confidence and clarity. But intelligence did not open every door. The university in Warsaw did not accept women. Not because Maria lacked discipline, not because her mind was unprepared, simply because she was a girl. So Maria and other young women found another path. They joined secret classes known as the Floating University. The lessons moved from one hidden place to another, so the police would not find them. To study was risky. To learn freely was dangerous. But they studied anyway. In those rooms, education became more than ambition. It became courage. It became a way of keeping the mind alive when the world tried to make it smaller. But courage alone could not open a university door. If Maria wanted a real university education, she needed Paris. And to reach Paris, she first had to wait. Maria and her older sister, Bronia, made a serious pact. Bronia wanted to study medicine in Paris. Maria wanted to study science. But their family did not have enough money for both dreams. So Maria agreed to work first. She would become a governess, a woman who lived with a family and taught their children. She would send her salary to Bronia in Paris. Then, when Bronia finished her studies, she would help Maria come to Paris too. It sounds simple when told quickly, but in real life, it meant 5 long years. 5 years of living in other people's houses. 5 years of teaching other people's children while her own future waited quietly. 5 years of sending away almost everything she earned. This is the part of history that often disappears. People remember the Nobel Prizes, the discoveries, and the famous name. But before the world knew Marie Curie, there was Maria, young and tired, studying alone at night after the house had gone quiet. She opened books on mathematics, physics, and chemistry. She wrote letters to Bronya, asking what to read next. She trained her mind without a university, without professors, without applause. Her progress was invisible, but it was real. Her classroom was whatever quiet corner she could find. Then, in 1891, at the age of 24, Maria finally boarded a train to Paris. In France, she became Marie. Not because she wanted to erase where she came from, but because she was stepping into a new world. Paris had the Sorbonne, one of Europe's great universities. Unlike Warsaw, the Sorbonne accepted women. For Marie, it must have seemed like the door had finally opened. But an open door is not always a warm room. Marie lived in a tiny room near the university, and there was no proper heat. In winter, the water in her washing bowl froze overnight. She had very little money. Some days, she ate only bread and a little chocolate. Sometimes hunger made her faint during lectures. And still, she studied. In 1893, she earned her degree in physics and graduated first in her class. 1 year later, she earned a second degree in mathematics and graduated second in her class. The world would later see her brilliance. But behind that brilliance was a frozen room, an empty stomach, and a woman who refused to stop learning. Then, in Paris, science brought another quiet soul into her life. His name was Pierre Curie. Pierre was a physicist, serious, gentle, and deeply devoted to truth. Their connection did not begin like a romantic legend. It began in the language of thought. They spoke about science. Then they spoke about life, and they recognized something in each other, a mind that did not want noise, but truth. They married in 1895. Marie did not wear a white wedding dress. She wore a dark blue dress. The reason was practical. She did not want to buy a dress that could only be worn once. A dark blue dress could be worn again in the laboratory. It was a small detail, but it revealed a great deal about her. Marie did not live for display. She lived for work. Together, Marie and Pierre worked in a poor, damp laboratory. It was cold in winter and hot in summer. The roof leaked. The walls were uncomfortable. It was not the kind of place people imagine when they think of world-changing discovery. But history has a strange habit of beginning in rooms no one respects. At that time, a scientist named Henri Becquerel had observed something strange. Certain materials gave off invisible rays, so these rays could pass through solid objects, but no one fully understood where they came from. Marie began to investigate. She measured carefully. She compared one material with another. Slowly, she reached a daring conclusion. The rays were not caused by two materials reacting with each other. They came from inside the atoms themselves. This was a revolutionary idea. Matter was not silent and fixed. Deep inside it, there was hidden energy. Marie gave this quality a name: radioactivity. The word came from radius, meaning ray, and activity, because the material kept producing energy. It was active from within. In 1898, Marie and Pierre announced the discovery of two new elements. The first was polonium. Marie named it after Polonia, the Latin name for Poland. This was more than a scientific label. Poland did not exist as a free country at that time, but Marie placed its name into the language of science. The second element was radium. Radium came from the same root meaning ray. It was powerful, mysterious, and beautiful. In the dark, radium gave off a faint blue. Imagine that poor laboratory at night. The tired hands, the heavy silence, the cold air, and on the shelves a soft blue light shining in the darkness. But there was nothing easy about finding that glow. Marie and Pierre processed tons of pitchblende, a dark mineral that contained tiny amounts of radioactive material. They stirred huge pots. They filtered. They separated. They repeated the same exhausting work for years. Tons of material, years of labor, a tiny amount of radium. The glow did not appear quickly. It had to be pulled from stone, from patience, from repetition, from endurance. As in 1903, Marie Curie received the Nobel Prize in Physics, shared with Pierre Curie and Henri Becquerel. She became the first woman in history to receive a Nobel Prize. At last, the world began to see her. But recognition was not the end of her struggle. In 1906, tragedy came suddenly. Pierre Curie was crossing a street in Paris on a rainy day. The road was wet. The city was busy. A horse-drawn carriage came through the street. Pierre was struck and died that same day. Marie lost more than a husband. She lost her closest scientific partner, her closest friend, and the person who had stood beside her in the long search for the invisible. Grief entered her life deeply, but it did not stop her work. The University of Paris offered her Pierre's teaching position. She accepted. In doing so, she became the first woman to teach as a full professor at the Sorbonne. On the day of her first lecture, the room was full. Marie sat down, opened her notes, and began exactly where Pierre's last lecture had ended. She did not turn grief into spectacle. She simply continued the work. In 1911, Marie Curie received a second Nobel Prize, this time in chemistry, for the discovery of polonium and radium, and for isolating pure radium. She became the only person in history to win Nobel Prizes in two different sciences. And yet, even then, the world was not fully ready to open every door. The French Academy of Sciences refused her membership by one vote. The reason was not a lack of achievement. It was because she was a woman. Marie had changed science. But old prejudice still stood in the doorway. Then came the First World War. Marie did not stay far from human suffering. She turned science toward healing. She created mobile X-ray units called petites curies. These vehicles carried X-ray equipment to hospitals near the front lines. Doctors could use them to locate broken bones and metal inside wounded soldiers. Marie helped train nurses. She drove near field hospitals herself. More than 1 million soldiers were helped by these mobile X-ray units. Her science was no longer only in a laboratory. It was near pain, fear, and human need. But the light she had discovered carried a price. For years, Marie had worked with radioactive materials without understanding the full danger. She handled radium. She carried test tubes. She lived close to the invisible force she had named. In 1934, Marie Curie died at the age of 66 from aplastic anemia, a disease connected to long exposure to radiation. The things she discovered helped change medicine, science, and the modern world. But it also slowly harmed her body. And now, the story returns to the beginning. The notebooks in Paris, the lead-lined boxes, the pages that still cannot be touched freely. Those notebooks are more than dangerous objects. They are proof that Marie Curie's life did not disappear. Her questions remained. Her sacrifice remained. Her work remained. There is something unforgettable about the blue glow of radium in the dark. It carries wonder and danger, hope and cost, discovery and loss. Marie Curie was born in a world that told her no. No, because her country was not free. No, because her family was poor. No, because she was a woman. No, because science belonged to other people. But again and again, she found another path. A secret classroom. A late-night book. A frozen Paris room. A damp laboratory. A blue glow in the dark. Her story reminds us that history is not only shaped by loud victories. Sometimes, history is shaped by quiet work, by a student studying alone, by a mind refusing to close, by a person continuing after loss. Marie Curie did not create light in one day. She followed one question, then another, then another. And slowly, what was invisible became powerful enough to change the world. Maybe that is the deepest glow she left behind. The belief that patient effort can leave a mark long after a life is gone. What part of Marie Curie's journey stayed with you the most? The radioactive notebooks, the 5 years she sacrificed before Paris, the blue glow of radium, or her courage to keep going after loss? Please share your thoughts in the comments so everyone can learn from each other's perspective. And if this story helped you feel more connected to English and history, please subscribe to English Mindwave to support the channel and help us continue creating more meaningful stories like this.